The final item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 9263 in the name of Stuart McMillan on fixed odds betting terminals in Scotland. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Members who wish to take part in the debate should press the request to speak button now. And I call on Stuart McMillan to open the debate. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Firstly, can I thank the members from across the parties who have supported the motion and allowed this debate to take place. I would also like to thank the Campaign for Fairer Gambling, who I met with last week. Many of the statistics that I will quote today with regards to the fixed odds betting terminals, the FOBTs, have come from the research reports that they have supplied, and I am happy to certainly forward these on to members across the chamber who would like them. So, certainly, what is a fixed odds betting terminal? An FOBT is a casino-style gaming machine found in our community's betting shops, and with 70% of the players of these machines saying that they would potentially stop playing them if roulette games were to be removed. It's clear that the casino-style roulette is the main feature, or certainly the main attraction of FOBTs. FOBTs only started to appear in betting shops at the turn of the new millennium, but they have now grown, and with the Gambling Commission reporting that there are now over 33,000 FOBTs currently in Britain's betting shops, and in the 2011-12 FOBTs have overtaken traditional over-the-counter betting on sports such as horse racing and football as the main source of revenue for high street bookmakers. Presiding Officer, these FOBTs are unique, as unlike slot machines or fruit machines, or the puggies as people would more commonly know them, where players are restricted to a maximum of £2 bet per play, FOBTs allow players to stake up to £100 per spin every 20 seconds. These machines are cash cows for bookmakers, and with the top companies making more than £900 per week profit from each machine that they operate, and unlike over-the-counter bets, this is completely a risk-free profit for the company. Now, I do think it's important, certainly at this point, to actually highlight I'm not against betting shops or betting or against people having a flutter, nor am I on a crusade to bring the betting industry to its knees. But what I am fundamentally against is bookmakers targeting areas of deprivation and high unemployment and keeping shops open solely for the purpose of these machines. While the betting industry may deny that they target areas, the facts speak for themselves. The area mentioned in the motion, Inverclyde, with a population of just over 82,000, has 70 FOBTs spread across 19 betting shops. Meanwhile, in Aberdeenshire, an area with a population 3 times that of Inverclyde, there are 78 FOBTs spread across 21 betting shops, only 2 shops more in an area with 3 times the population. So why is the number of FOBTs per head of population 3 times higher in Inverclyde than in Aberdeenshire? What is the difference between Inverclyde and Aberdeenshire? And I would suggest it would be the unemployment rate. Inverclyde's unemployment rate is currently higher than the Scottish national average. Meanwhile, Aberdeenshire has the lowest unemployment rate in Scotland. And surely the betting industry can't claim that this is just sheer coincidence. Now, further examples can be seen in Western Bartonshire, which has 89 FOBTs, 11 more than Aberdeenshire, despite the population being yet again a third of the size. And in East Renfrewshire, an area with similar population levels as Western Bartonshire and Inverclyde, the number of FOBTs is only 56. Presiding Officer, again, the comparison and the unemployment levels may reveal the reasons behind this. Betting shops opening hours now stretch from 7 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, and they beam in horse racing from Argentina, as well as showing animated racing. Now, I genuinely don't believe for 1 minute that shops stay open because customers wish to have lots of punts on Argentinian horse racing or study the form of cartoon dog racing. And it's clear to me that the sole purpose of staying open so late and opening so early is for the FOBTs. This is also the firm opinion of many reformed gamblers. Now, last week, I met with a former gambler from Inverclyde whose life was turned upside down by FOBTs. He lost everything. Now, thankfully, with the help of Gamblers Anonymous, he has came through the other side. And I want to take this opportunity to put on record my admiration for the work carried out by organisations such as GA and commend the bravery of those individuals who actually seek their help. Well, speaking to this individual and so also reading the reports available, I was alarmed to discover that the FOBT users are increasingly likely to be young males, but there's also an increasing number of females getting hooked. And I was informed of young apprentices losing their jobs and a football club in the SPFL contacting GA for help with our young trainees. I've now written to the Chief Executives of all of Scotland's 32 local authorities, asking them to consider inviting representatives from GA in to speak to their S3, S4 and S5 pupils in their areas about the dangers of these machines and the effect that gambling can actually have upon people's lives. And the personal human impact of FOBTs and the damage any form of addiction to them can cause to individuals and families is frightening. 62% of FOBT players agree that they have gambled until all of their money has gone. 68% agree that if they lose all, they will chase their losses. And 69% also agree that when they win, they want to keep on gambling, with 59% agreeing that whatever they do win, they will put it back into the machine. However, as well as the human impact, FOBTs have a very damaging effect upon the local economy, as each pound that's spent on one of these machines is a pound that's not spent elsewhere within that particular economy. In the briefing for today's debate, the Association of British Bookmakers have said that any regulation on FOBTs would lead to job losses in the industry. However, expenditure on these machines supports very little employment compared to that of consumer spending elsewhere in the economy. So much so that in a report by Howard Reid, Director of Landsman Economics, it's estimated that £1 billion of expenditure on the FOBT machines supports 7,000 jobs in the UK, in comparison to 20,000 jobs that £1 billion of average consumer spending would support. That I would actually contend that FOBTs actually are costing more jobs than they're creating. So how do we tackle the issue of these machines? Campaigners would like the maximum bet on the machines reduced from £100 to £2 to bring it in line with the other gaming machines in the UK. 53% of players saying that they would potentially stop playing machines if the maximum stake was only £2. It's clear that this seems to be a very logical option, and it's one that I certainly back. Increasing the time spent between bets from the current 20 seconds may also help reduce the amount wagered on these machines. I also back this particular action, giving the player more time to fully consider what they're doing. Presiding Officer, gambling is currently a matter reserved to Westminster, and as such, the regulation of FOBTs is also reserved. I therefore last week wrote to the new Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, asking him to seriously consider the regulation of these FOBT machines. Reducing the maximum bet on these machines is something that for the Department of Culture, Media and Sport they can do it right now. And I would also kindly ask members of the Conservative and Liberal Democrat benches to speak to the colleagues in the UK on this particular matter. But certainly, in terms of Scotland, we have to look at all the options. Today I attended the summit organised by the Minister for Local Government and Planning on gambling in our town centres. While gambling remains reserved, the matter of licensing and planning does not. To conclude with, Presiding Officer, since I started speaking, someone somewhere in Scotland will have been able to gamble up to £2,200 on one of these terminals. A large sum, I'm sure that you'll agree. I hope we as a Parliament can play our part in helping our communities deal with these machines. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I offer my congratulations to Stuart McMillan for securing this debate. It is on an issue that is of particular concern to the communities that I represent, as it is in Inverclyde, so I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak this evening. And the statistics show that the proliferation of bookmakers and the impact of fixed odds betting terminals is endemic in poorer communities, and Stuart McMillan is right to highlight this fact. A recent study by the Campaign for Fairer Gambling demonstrated that people in the poorest parts of Scotland staked almost double the amount on addictive gambling machines than those in wealthier areas. The communities of Postle Park and Keppochhill in my constituency rank second and third in the most deprived data zones in Scotland, but they have no shortage of fixed odds betting terminals, with Saracen Street alone estimated to have 31. That these terminals are addictive gambling machines cannot, I think, be in question. And as the motion acknowledges, they have been described as the crack cocaine of gambling addiction. Evidence shows, Presiding Officer, that for every percentage increase in unemployment in an area, there's a 20% increase in the number of bookmakers. And by 2012, the profit generated for bookmakers from these terminals reached over £1.4 billion. It is, to me, abhorrent that this profit is being made on the backs of the poorest people in our communities right across the country. In Glasgow, The Labour-controlled Council is working hard to tackle poverty with a range of measures: apprenticeships, support for the living wage, improvements in childcare, and through the establishment of Glasgow's Poverty Leadership Panel. Through these actions, the problems caused by debt, income inequality, payday lenders, addiction and fixed odds betting terminals can be addressed, but there is only so much the City Council can do on its own, and it needs the support of the Scottish and UK governments to act too. The summit convened by the Minister to look at the twin issues of payday lenders and gambling outlets is very welcome, and I look forward to hearing more about the summit, perhaps this evening in his speech. But I hope that that will lead to local authorities being given the power to allow them to use planning and licensing laws to address the proliferation of these predatory industries in our communities. Recently, my council colleagues Chris Kelly and Helen Stephen and myself successfully lobbied the council to have its new licensing statement recognise Postle Park as an area of concern because of the disproportionate number of alcohol selling outlets it has. So too, we need to have a similarly focused approach to fixed odds betting. But we must also look, of course, to the UK Government to take action. In its most recent budget, it did act to increase the tax take from such terminals. But this does nothing to reduce the impact of those terminals in our communities. It merely increases their importance as a cash cow to government and perhaps makes it less likely that they will act in a way that would actually reduce the misery caused. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any signs from the Tory-led government that it's likely to give a single penny of this additional revenue to tackling poverty or to addressing addiction. We must, of course, keep government under pressure to take action to reduce, as Stuart McMillan rightly said, the current £100 maximum stake to a figure of £2, to increase the time between plays, and to allow flexibility in the 4-terminal limit to allow for a greater restriction on the number of machines in any one outlet. A reduction in the maximum stake could be done right now. It doesn't even need primary legislation. I referred earlier, Presiding Officer, to fixed odds betting terminals being the crack cocaine of gambling addiction. If there was to be an explosion of crack cocaine addiction, governments would quite rightly act. Well, the explosion in the use of fixed odds betting terminals in communities like mine deserves a similarly robust approach. It is incumbent on government at all levels to act now to address this growing problem, and I very much hope that the debate we have this evening helps to gain some momentum in that direction.
Nigel John, followed by Annabel Gold.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and can I congratulate Stuart McMillan on bringing this debate forward, because I think it's an extremely important issue, which I confess I knew very little about and I've had to stop and think about. And at the same time, Brecon Community Council actually approached me and said, what were we going to do about it, because it actually concerned them in my hometown. It seems to me, though, that I'd like to look just a little bit wider than the issue that Stuart McMillan has raised, just for the moment. Because it does seem to me, Presiding Officer, that we now live in a country where gambling has become normalised. Gambling and betting organisations seem to sponsor an awful lot of sport, to the point that when I went on my iPhone recently to try and see what had happened to the World Championship snooker results, because I was just interested, I found in the simple process of trying to move the picture across that I put my finger on a button that took me straight to an online gambling site. That was just there, and actually I didn't even try to find it. And it does seem to me, and maybe I'm a heretic or a Puritan or a strange guy or something, but it does seem to me that gambling's a rather silly thing to do, unless you know something that the bookies don't. And if you know that the machine is only going to give you 97% of what you've put into it back, and as Stuart McMillan has just pointed out, most of you are going to keep putting it in until it doesn't come back out, then actually banging your head against a brick wall and throwing the money into the river might give you at least the joy of banging your head against a brick wall. It's actually a crazy occupation. Now, people do it because they think they might gain something. There's some kind of adrenaline rush. Maybe it's what other people do and they think it's cool. But there's only one possible result, and that is debt. And then we've had a very interesting brief from Citizens Advice Scotland explaining some of these very sad cases. And of course, they deal with debt from all sorts of other places as well. Why on earth would we as a society want to have these machines that take the money out of the pockets of people who clearly are not being very sensible and therefore need a bit of help and advice? Why on earth are we letting that happen at all? I'm reminded, to me, the gambling industry is similar to those who produce cigarettes. There is no safe way of using a cigarette. If you derive some short-term benefit from it, so be it. Some people do it for a very long time and it doesn't kill them, but by and large we know it's an extremely bad idea. I can think of no earthly reason why gambling is a good idea, and if somebody can advise me otherwise, please do. However, when we then look at the particular issue of fixed odds betting machines, then there do seem to be some specific suggestions, and they've already been mentioned by other members, and I don't want to rehearse that. But it does seem to me that if we can see this as the biggest problem, and I think the statistics say it is the biggest problem, and we can find ways of reducing that as an issue by reducing the size of the bet and maybe increasing the cycle time, then clearly that's a good idea. But I think what I would like to encourage the government to think about, and I recognise this is reserved, so I don't want to be too pointed about this, I think what I'd like the government to be thinking about, particularly if we ever did get the powers, of course, which I hope we do, to deal with this, is how do we make gambling as a whole less attractive, more difficult to do, and how do we get folk to understand that actually it's a daft idea? The bookies are still in business because they set the odds in their direction. And we see that in spades in fixed odds machines, where you are absolutely bound to lose. We really shouldn't be doing it, should we? We really shouldn't be allowing it. And I think it's actually a challenge to government to say, how on earth are we actually going to stop this? I'm not pretending it's easy, but the suggestion that it's perfectly legal seems to me to be a very good reason for making sure that it isn't legal. Thank you.
I now call Annabel Goldie to be followed by Hansala Malik.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I also thank Stuart McMillan for bringing this debate to the Chamber? I'm clear there remains a serious case to answer in relation to the potential harm caused by fixed odds betting terminals, but I do think, Presiding Officer, it's important to ensure balance in any discussion. Naturally, we are all concerned with the figures being quoted that an astonishing £4.4 billion was wagered in Scotland on these machines last year, and that considerable amounts of money can be spent in relatively short periods of time. But any action taken in response must be based on evidence. Presiding Officer, the gambling industry is an industry. It provides jobs, it pays taxes. Indeed, it will be paying more taxes under measures recently announced by the Chancellor. And it is an industry which, if run responsibly, can actually represent a safe and enjoyable leisure activity. It is legal. And while I do understand Mr Don's apprehension about gambling as an activity, nonetheless, it is within a free society something that we do permit to happen. And that is why, while I support the intention behind the motion, indeed I have signed it, I do have some observations. The suggestion that you can gamble hundreds of pounds every 20 seconds does invite question. You know, can machines be loaded that quickly? I don't know, but is there evidence? And if so, let's see it. You know, let's have the evidence brought forward. Clearly, you can gamble considerable amounts of money in relatively short periods of time in other ways, at traditional casinos, at horse races and online. But I do accept there is a particular concern surrounding fixed odds machines, and I also accept and sympathise with Mr McMillan's concern about the prevalence of these machines in Inverclyde. It is important that robust player protections are put in place, and it is a case that the amount of money spent on FOBTs, the fact that relatively high stakes can be bet relatively quickly and easily, as well as the apparently disproportionate contribution they make to high street bookmakers, that should indeed provoke thought and discussion. It is the case that the number of betting shops is not rising significantly, but there is a feeling that they are becoming a more obvious feature of our towns and cities and handling greater and greater sums of money. And I was interested in Mr McMillan's analysis of the geographical spread of these presences. That is why the UK Government last year did launch a consultation to try and shed some light on the use of fixed odds machines. And I think that was important because we have to ensure, as I say, that any action taken is proportionate, that it's effective and that it is evidence-based. The consultation did not provide clear evidence for a way forward. In particular, evidence was not forthcoming that there was a direct link between these machines and problem gambling. And problem gambling apparently is not higher amongst those who play fixed odds machines. The vast majority of users played them occasionally and spent relatively modest sums. Research confirms those with a gambling problem, and that is serious, let us be quite clear about it, used a variety of products. Now, there are steps which have been taken by the UK Government, including a voluntary code, and it is my understanding that the UK Government is looking closely at whether other measures should be introduced. I accept it's a reserved matter. There is action that can be taken in Scotland to promote responsible gambling. Scottish ministers and through them licensing boards have the power to set fees and licence conditions for all gambling premises, and it is within their power to refuse licences on the basis of risk to vulnerable groups. Local authorities also have the power to grant a licence with additional conditions. Deputy Presiding Officer, the motion notes there is a need to increase awareness of problem gambling and improve support to those who have a problem. I think it's good that the Scottish Health Survey now collects information and that is available. And I also commend the work of organisations such as Gamblers Anonymous, with which I think a number of us have engaged, and they do excellent work in educating about the potential dangers of gambling and providing support to those who have a problem. And that work is, I think, every bit as important as any restrictions that might be contemplated for betting shops in our high streets.
Thank you. Hanzala Malik.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Presiding Officer. I thank Stuart McMillan for securing today's debate, which is a major issue for my constituents in Glasgow. As you will be aware, that 4.4 billion was wagered in Scotland on fixed odds betting terminals in 2013. I am worried about the statistic, and I believe FOBTs are a scourge to Scotland. FOBT is sometimes referred to as the crack cocaine of gambling, is due to the speed at which large sums of money can be lost and the high addictive roulette content. FOBTs are making a high contribution of problem gambling than any other form of gambling. FOBTs gambling is the main source of revenue for betting shops, so no wonder the bookmakers are defending it so vigorously. The Association of British Bookmakers, ABB, state that shops do not target deprived areas, but this is clearly untrue, as there are more than twice the number of betting shops in poorer areas compared to the most affluent areas in Scotland. Even betting, 1 billion spent on FOBs is an estimate that 7,000 jobs are created in a betting sector. The ABB submitted a government consultation claiming that 7,800 betting shops and 39,000 jobs would be at risk if there was a reduction of FOBTs. Maximized stakes from 100 to £2 per spin, bringing them in line with all the other high street gambling machines. However, each pound spent on FOBTs, net of winnings, is by definition a pound which is not spent elsewhere in the economy. For every 1 billion spent on FOBTs, at the same time, concept spending and other goods and services falls by 1 billion, which reduces employment in other industries. By rounding 20,000 increasing in spending on FOBTs are likely to destroy jobs in the British economy rather than create them. The government must reduce the maximum stake on these machines from 100 per spin to £2 per spin, and reduce the number of machines from 4 to 1 per shop. A spokesperson from the campaign of Fairer Gambling said the bookmakers manipulate data and make it seem like these machines are benefiting the community, which is far from the truth. The betting shops are real, they are happening, they are devastating our communities. Something needs to be done to stop them, and therefore I am in support of your motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Malik. I now call on the Cabinet Secretary to wind up the debate. 7 minutes, Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I, like other members, start by thanking Stuart McMillan for raising this issue, and thank him in particular, but the members from around the Chamber, who I think have given very thoughtful and pointed comments. With regard to Stuart McMillan, I think it was a very thoughtful and well-researched speech, pointing out the correlation between areas of poverty and deprivation. That was a matter echoed also not simply by Hansala Malik, who's just spoken, but also by Patricia Ferguson. There does seem to be something stark there, whether it's the Inverclyde-Aberdeenshire divide or indeed the point made by Patricia Ferguson about Kepperhill and indeed Possil. This is an issue and we do have to seek to tackle it. It is a reserved matter, as has been commented, but there are actions that can and doubtless will be taken, whether it's by local authorities or indeed a comment by ourselves. And I welcome the support, I think, that has been given to the summit being held by my ministerial colleague, and I can confirm to Patricia Ferguson that I have no doubt Derek Mackay will be happy to keep her in the loop. It's not simply a problem we face in Scotland. The comment made, I think, by Nigel Dawn shows that it's a global issue. It's not simply what you get on the internet, but you can hardly watch a sporting event without seeing gambling portrayed, certainly in professional football. But indeed, as Annabel Goldie said, it is to some extent, I think, a matter of balance. The Scottish Government is not anti-gambling. We acknowledge that it is an activity that provides harmless entertainment to many and is a significant provider of both employment and taxes, as she mentioned. There are those within my own and Stuart McMillan's party that are known to enjoy a flutter, and good luck to them. It's not something I participate in myself, but as I say, it is a matter of balance. But we also recognise that it is an activity that can have a significant negative impact on individuals and the wider community, and that it therefore needs to be appropriately regulated. It is problem gambling, not gambling itself, that is the ultimate focus of our concern. But I think there is a clear correlation from around the Chamber that it is a matter of concern, certainly in areas blighted by social and economic deprivation. When it comes to the impact of compulsive gambling, the Scottish Government is aware of the efforts of all those organisations and agencies that find themselves on the front line, and I'm glad that Stuart McMillan put his gratitude on record, and I would echo that to those agencies that work so hard. These are the people that pick up the pieces after addiction has set in. We acknowledge and are grateful for the valuable work of Gamblers Anonymous and other organisations across Scotland. They raise the awareness of the dangers associated with gambling and give support to those who seek help. It is a matter that's not restricted simply to social and economic areas of deprivation. It's also a matter that seems more recently to have jumped and was commented upon, I think, by Patricia Ferguson and by Stuart McMillan across the gender divide. Some sections of the population gamble in different ways, but the issue remains fundamentally the same. But we cannot find, and those organisations cannot fight this battle on their own. They need considered engagement from government and from Parliament, and they do need effective legislation. That said, as I stand here, there is the issue that has been commented on by many, that it is reserved. The consequences of problem gambling can be seen in Scotland. The 2012 Scottish Health Survey identified that some 31,000 adults in Scotland were problem gamblers. We recognise the harm that can flow from compulsive gambling. While the numbers of problem gamblers may seem relatively small, the impact their addiction can have on them and those close to them is devastating. We can see the cost in broken families, suicides and criminality. These are the problems that Scotland should be able to deal with, but we simply don't have the powers to address it at the present moment, as the regulation of gambling is reserved to Westminster. It is our view that the UK has not done enough to address problem gambling, and I'm grateful to members who have written to the UK confirming their concerns. When Westminster significantly liberalised the regulation of gambling in 2005, I doubt that they fully recognise the impact that technology would have. The current Gambling and Licensing Advertising Bill is a step in the right direction, but it's a very limited step indeed. But we do welcome, as Annabel Goldie was saying, some particular aspects, and indeed the offshoring aspect equally has to be addressed. In this context, Stuart McMillan's motion asks that we express concern about the extent of the stakes wagered on fixed odds betting terminals. It asks that we understand the possibly addictive nature of these machines, and that was commented on by many. As the Minister for Community Safety and Legal Affairs said earlier this month, the Scottish Government shares his concern about the impact of new technologies, particularly fixed odds betting terminals and the previous liberalisation of gambling laws. The first step in addressing this concern is to ensure that we fully understand what these impacts are. We do need more detailed research. We are grateful and welcome steps taken by the Responsible Gambling Trust to explore this issue. Despite the limited scope we have for taking action needed in Scotland, we will do what we can do. It is incumbent upon governments, UK, Scottish and indeed local authorities to do so. I have previously written to UK ministers and will continue to work with the Gambling Commission to raise our concerns. We have also taken steps in initiating a wider discussion about gambling, and today was mentioned by Patricia Ferguson, the Minister for Local Government and Planning, hosted a summit on town centres to explore the impact of betting shops and payday loan companies on our communities, which most, as I say, people who contributed today commented on. There is a clear correlation and something almost site-specific regarding areas of multiple deprivation, and I'm glad that we have some shared concerns around the Chamber regarding that. So we recognise that there is a job of work for the Scottish Government to do. We will seek to do that, and no doubt Derek Mackay will happily engage in feedback to those who attended and those who weren't able to attend at his summit today to see what action we can take forward there. There will be a role for local government, and the point raised by Patricia Ferguson about action sought to be taken by Glasgow Council is welcome. And equally, I think it's welcome that we should be able to put on record to Westminster our concerns that whilst we welcome the action they're taking, there is still further action that needs to be addressed, because the issue would appear to me to be one that is only going to be growing. So again, I put on record my thanks to Stuart McMillan for raising this issue, my gratitude to all in the Chamber for recognising the problem, and we work together to try and reach a shared solution, whether in London, whether in Edinburgh, or indeed whether in our own local authorities.
Can I thank all members who take part in the debate tonight and the Cabinet Secretary. I now close this meeting.